Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Only Podcast, Final Four edition. My name is Chris Vernini, your host, and I'm joined, as always, by theonlycolors.com managing editor Joe Toohey. We're here to we are here to preview the Final Four somehow. It still doesn't even feel like that MSU's in the Final Four. They played Duke in 4 days, and I barely even looked at Duke. Part of it's just been work, but I think a lot of MSU fans still haven't gotten over the fact that they're here. As this Final Four week goes on, I wanted to plug the site. If you're not listening to this on the site, theonlycolors.com. Have a lot of good stuff leading up to the Final Four weekend worth checking out, and so make sure you do that. And so as we bring Joe in here, Joe, it's been 2 days since we're recording this on Tuesday night. 2 days since MSU defeated Louisville to get to the Final Four. We'll talk about the game a little bit, but we hit a lot of it in our post-game show. Where are your emotions at right now as we're about halfway through this Final Four week?
Well, I mean, I didn't expect in late March to be writing an article about bagels, so I'm not sure exactly where my emotions are. I mean, obviously, very excited, but it's been a strange week already, and I expect it to just be more strange. And yeah, I think maybe a little bit of the MSU fan sort of not thinking about Duke yet is just sort of denial in some way, right? Like, oh man, now we have to play Duke. Like, this is going to be painful. Might as well just bask in the fact that we got here. So yeah, that's the big thing.
That could be it. Izzo's 1-8 against Duke, and I think a lot of the maybe energy into beating Duke may have gone away in recent years with that Sweet 16 loss 2 years ago. Michigan State Sweet 16 loss 2 years ago in Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, and the fact that these teams already met this year. But we'll talk about Duke in a minute. Yeah, you mentioned this throwing bagels thing. I still haven't seen. I don't know if anybody's found an actual reason as to why it happened, but I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was unique. I thought it was kind of dumb that people got arrested for it. I think it absolutely should replace the idiotic and even more nonsensical quote-unquote tradition of burning couches, because bagels are delicious, and all the squirrels on campus, I'm sure, enjoy that. Joe, you're the one who wrote about the bagels. What did you put together some stuff? What do you think about the bagels?
Well, I think it basically sums up perfectly the inexplicableness, if that's a word, it probably isn't, of the Final Four run generally. I have no idea how MSU as a basketball team got to this point where they're in the Final Four, and we're talking about them, and it's the very end of March. We only have 3 more hours of March left. And I also have absolutely no idea how it is that students all of a sudden decided that throwing bagels was a good idea. And neither do the MSU police. The guys who are actually paid to investigate these things, especially considering the fact that they arrested people for it. You'd think that they would want to investigate what kind of led up to that a little bit. The quote that came from, it was a Freep article, the quote that came from the lieutenant was, and I quote, "It was just something that happened," which really settles that whole case. I think they figured that one out. But yeah, I mean, the only potential explanation I could think of is that some student might have been working at Brugger's or something, and got off of their shift. They probably closed early on Sunday.
You can buy the the week-old bagels pretty cheap.
Right. So that's my guess is that like someone just got off their shift, they had a whole bunch of bagels, and they just brought them, and they probably wanted to actually eat them. I mean, it is Cedar Village, right? You know, the kids are hungry, but yeah, it kind of amazing, and there's no explanation. The parody Twitter account is pretty fantastic at CV Bagel. They've been pretty good. They got up to like 300 followers faster than I've ever seen anyone get up to 300 followers, which is pretty impressive. Yeah, I have no explanation, and the thing is too, like when I first saw the story and it said like students throwing bagels and other stuff, it was like, okay, well, you know, someone just grabbed whatever was on their kitchen counter and ran out to Cedar Village. But no, like the video shows like it's dozens and dozens and dozens of bagels. Like it's not just like someone, it's not like a handful of bagels. It's like a whole, I don't know how you get that many bagels. It's really inexplicable. And I tweeted out, I think this is a pretty good idea, jokingly at least, is to have a serial style podcast where instead of investigating murders, it's just me investigating how those bagels got to Cedar Village. I think
you can call it like cereal, like breakfast cereal.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's perfect.
When you said cereal podcast, I thought we were going to talk about Captain Crunch. It took me a couple seconds to realize what you were talking about. But I said this after the post game show, or in the post game show. I thought the fact that they won in the middle of the day helped what maybe otherwise would have been a more raucous environment,
Right.
which I think is always good. I will never understand burning couches because, for one, couches are expensive, and two, they're incredibly comfortable. Why would you want to waste it? Someone mentioned bed bugs to me, but I don't think people are sitting around saving their couches with bed bugs for a big sporting event to go out and burn them. It's just kind of a spur-of-the-moment thing, and I don't understand it. I like dumpster fire. I can understand how that happens because you've got the dumpster to protect it. The couch makes no sense. There's a whole effort that goes into taking it out, and in East Lansing, you're not allowed to have them on your porches anymore. I know Ann Arbor is the same way, and it's to prevent stuff like that. So it's like a lot of effort that's wiggling it out of the doorway. I imagine has to be a pain in the butt. So like moving. So I don't know why that's a thing. It'd be cool if bagels simply replaced that. So, and it would be much more safer, and it would feed squirrels. So do that instead of any property damage. That's what I would suggest. Now, 2 days since the Louisville game, I called that second half overtime maybe one of the greatest defensive halves in MSU history. Louisville went 5 for 22 from the field, 5 for 25 from the field in the second half, and 3 of those were steals for layups. So it was really 3 for 22 out of the half-court offense, which is great, which is remarkable. And then it was similar stuff in overtime. Joe, 2 days later, looking back on the Louisville game, anything jumped out to you, change at all?
No, not really. I mean, Heck had a really good post on his blog, The Cover 4, about just how incredible that defensive performance was. I think we're pretty well. I think we covered it pretty well. I mean, I think it was pretty historic. It's probably one of the better halves and overtimes of the Izzo era. And it's amazing, just especially considering how poor that first half was. In comparison, right? It's not like they were playing good defense in the first half and then just ratcheted it up a little bit. It was like a complete turnaround in that second half, which was awesome. Yeah. Yeah,
Louisville shot better than 50% in the first half, and they're not even that good an offensive team, but a lot of it was just simple spacing and not keeping an eye out under the basket.
Yeah. I thought Dawson.
Are you doing the dishes over there?
I've got a roommate who is. 1 second.
Oh, it's fine. I thought you were doing the dishes as you were podcasting a double duty at 9 o'clock at night. But as we kind of turn the focus toward Duke here, which yeah, there's not much that we don't know about Duke. Izzo's 1-8 against them. That lone win being in the 2005 Sweet 16, and the most recent loss coming this year, an 81-71 loss. So I think the game, of all the history between Izzo and Krzyzewski, I think more than anything, you can look at the game this year. It was MSU's second game of the year. They played in Indianapolis, and it was an 81-71 Duke win. It was a game that was pretty close throughout. MSU was only down 7 at halftime. It was a game that was close throughout, and then Duke kind of pulled away at the end in a game that probably at the time didn't feel as close as the final score indicated. But as you kind of look at the box score here, based on memory, Jahlil Okafor was a guy who stuck out in memory in that game. He went 8 for 10 shooting, 17 points, was fairly unstoppable there. But Duke had 4 guys in 7 figures, and then not much from the bench. Just 2 baskets from the bench. Rasheed Suleiman played 12 minutes, is no longer with the team. So it was really just kind of the starters who dealt with Michigan State. The Spartans, meanwhile, Brandon Dawson had a strong game, and he's a guy who's going to come into focus in this game. 9 rebounds, 18 points to lead MSU. He also went 8 for 10 from the floor, and Travis Trice had 15 points on 7 for 15 shooting. Spartans only went 5 for 20 from deep in that game, while Duke went 7 for 14. Spartans did better on the glass, but these are 2 different teams, I think, since this game. And Joe, when you're looking at the MSU-Duke matchup, what sticks out first?
Yeah, sorry about that. I have pretty thin walls in my apartment. I think what's interesting in looking back at the box score is, first, MSU turned the ball over a lot. It was a 20% turnover rate, which is pretty high, and especially high considering just how much better this team has gotten at protecting the ball. So that's definitely one area where the team could really improve. And then also and specifically, right, Denzel Valentine had 5, Tum Tum had 2, and Tum Tum actually played, kind of big minutes. He played 21 minutes, which is more than he was playing for most of that non-con schedule. But I expect that to come down a little bit. And then the other interesting thing is 3-point shooting. MSU was just 25% from 3 in that game. And I think some of that was forcing shots a little bit. But Trice was 1 for 5. Valentine was 1 for 4. And those are the guys who are hitting the majority of them. Right, and Duke actually shot quite well from 3. They shot 50% from 3. So right. There are areas in which MSU can improve pretty quickly. And go from there. But one thing is that Duke really got to the line, and I kind of expect that to continue. I just think that this MSU team is going to have to play physical defense in such a way that will require fouling, and also Duke's going to get some calls. I mean, that's just kind of how that goes. I don't think that there's any getting around that. Well, Duke comes into this game number 3 in adjusted offense total, and number 4 in the country in 2-point shooting, most of that being Okafor. So it's a team that's relied on their defense this year, but in the tournament, they relied on their offense. Their defense in the tournament has been remarkably strong. Grantland's heat charts showed just how much better Duke's defense has been in the tournament, and MSU has been a team that has been better on offense than defense. Number 13 in the country, which has been very respectable, and that's despite a lot of the not getting to the free throw line and not making them when they get there. But it's the defense that is, when they've done well, especially in this tournament, it's been because of the defense. When they made the comeback on Oklahoma, it was because of the defense. When they made the comeback on Louisville, was because of the defense. The biggest reason they were able to beat Virginia was just completely shutting them down with their defense. So when you look at the season numbers for both of these teams, I don't know if it totally reflects what these teams have done in the tournament, but Jahlil Okafor was
number 3 on Ken Palm's Player of the Year rankings. He's got a 66.8 efficient field goal percentage. He rebounds well on both sides. He blocks shots. He draws a lot of fouls. He doesn't commit fouls. He gets the free throw line. He does, he just does a lot. He may be the number 1 pick in the draft next year, and he had his way against the Spartans last year. Something that I noticed, I don't remember who tweeted it, but on the year, Okafor is only a 51% free throw shooter, and it's even low. It's something in the 30s or 40s, I believe, in the tournament or over his last few games or so. So how much he gets to the line will be interesting, because MSU, every game, Costello and or Gavin Schilling are in foul trouble, and it was the case against Louisville. So it's going to be interesting to see if the big men can stay out of foul trouble, because this is a Duke team that is pretty good on the offensive glass. They're average on the defensive glass, and it's a spot where MSU's kind of struggled this year, or in this tournament, on the glass. I think inside is going to be a big focus, especially with how Duke has been playing inside on both sides of the ball. They don't let opponents get to the free throw line. Duke's only number 1 under 15 in getting to the free throw line. But they were number 2 in the ACC. So I know with Duke, a lot of people like to say they're going to get calls. I don't think that's the case. But
yeah, I mean, one interesting thing about Okafor is that he's been relatively ineffective in the last couple games. Held to single digits against both Utah and Gonzaga. Although that didn't make a huge difference in either game, and it doesn't appear as though that was due to foul trouble either. So, I mean, maybe there's something there that Izzo can latch onto. But I think, what do you think the over/under is on number of Wallenman minutes in this game? My guess is that it's about 10. Something tells me that we'll be seeing some Wallenman one way or another.
I might put the over/under at about 7, but yeah, it's something that Schilling, foul trouble's always been an issue with him. Costello, when it's not an issue, it seems to quickly become an issue, and when he doesn't have fouls, he'll somehow end up with 3 in the span of a minute or something like that. But his defense, it's in this tournament. Schilling's offense and Costello's defense have both been strong. Schilling, in the Big Ten tournament, he seemed out of it. He seemed to have no confidence whatsoever. But then in this tournament, especially in the Sweet 16 Elite 8, he has seemed much more aggressive on the offensive side. He's hit some free throws. He's got some fast break dunks. He's been a valuable piece on offense, and Costello has been tasked with guarding some strong big men in Virginia, Georgia, and Louisville, and done pretty well defensively. But then once they get fouls, it kind of changes up the rhythm a bit, and I don't see any reason why that's going to change in this game.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, what else there's going to be to do with Okafor, just because I'm pretty sure we're not going to see a whole lot of doubling in the post. I think that the guards have gotten better at digging onto the guy in the post with the ball, off of the ball, which has been good. Especially
late against Louisville.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's sort of as much help as we're gonna be giving on Okafor. So, that's going to be really interesting to see just how, if Schilling can avoid fouling early. I have less of an issue with Schilling fouling in terms of like trying to stop an easy shot from going up, just because in those cases it's sort of lower or higher reward at least. The fouls that Schilling gets that could be problematic here are where he's trying to get the guy in the post off of his spot. In some cases, unnecessarily. And so to me, those earlier in the shot clock fouls against Schilling will be really interesting to watch.
When you look at the rest of what Duke's got, Tyus Jones runs the point for them. He's 6'1", 190, a smaller guy who MSU should be able to match up with okay, at least in terms of a body. Justice Winslow is a guy who's kind of gotten a lot of attention in this in this tournament. He shoots 41% from three. They've also got Quinn Cook, who shoots 40% from deep. Tyus Jones is at 37. So you've got guys that can hit the deep ball, and it seems like Duke always has this at home and in the tournament. When they need a big three-pointer, they get it. If a team's starting to make a run, they get a three. If they get a big defensive stop, they get a big shot. This is a team that seems to always kind of hit that big play, and they did it against Gonzaga. And when these teams met in the Sweet 16 2 years ago, they were just murdered by Seth Curry and his three-point shooting, and they fell way behind early and were never able to catch up. Duke went 7 for 14 in this game, so it's going to be interesting to see how MSU plays any sort of screens, if they go above screens, because they're going to need to keep Duke off the three-point line. I think that's going to be one of the biggest keys in this. Duke's not a particularly great three-point shooting team this year. What are they at? 39%, 21 in the country. They're much better inside, 56% on twos, and a big part of that's Okafor. And I think making them one-dimensional and making them take it inside is going to be key, because this is a Duke team that can attack you in so many different ways on offense, whether it's shooting, whether it's driving, whether it's dumping it in. They seem to have everything you could want on offense.
Yeah, I think too, the aggressiveness by MSU on the other end will be important. MSU has improved in terms of free throw rate over the course of the year, and actually Okafor had 4 fouls in that first matchup. So if there's some ability to get to the line early and draw some fouls, and Duke doesn't really have anybody who can take the place of Okafor. I'm not sure anybody does, but especially when Okafor comes out of the game, it's a major loss for them. So if there's any way that you could get 2 quick fouls in Okafor, that would be in the first half. That would be huge, because even though there's a Plumlee on the bench, it isn't a vintage Plumlee, if I can use those words. So yeah, that's one way in which MSU could sort of counteract some of that offensive effectiveness is by being aggressive on offense themselves.
Now, does this look like it doesn't look like a particularly deep Duke team to me. They got Okafor, Jones, Winslow, Cook, and Jefferson. After that, Suleiman's no longer on the team. Matt Jones gets some play. But, I think the fouls there could be big, because it's not a team that has been particularly deep, while MSU, on the other hand, has basically thrived. Yeah, Duke's number 308 in bench minutes. Meanwhile, MSU has kind of thrived by being able to sub guys and not have that much of a drop-off, whether it's Marvin Clark picking up some rebounds, whether that's, I guess, Nairn starts, but you got guys, Costello comes off the bench. They can mix and match guys. Forbes comes off the bench. Forbes has been very good from deep. Izzo says he doesn't have a rotation, and he kind of gave up with it, but they seem to have, as long as they have 2 ball handlers out there, they seem to be able to handle things well, especially on defense. I know there have been some weird lineups where offensively they're a mess, but this team plays tremendous team defense, and I think ESPN had a nice, or it might have been Seth Greenberg, had a nice breakdown of that, how simple the off-ball defending makes everything go, and that's going to have to be the key again on defense, because one-on-one there's no one who can stop Okafor, and man for man Duke's a much more talented team, but I think MSU is going to have to use that team defense as it has on this run to get the stops, and I think that's going to, as always with this team, is going to have to start on defense.
Yeah, and I think obviously getting out to a lead early is always good, but I think especially in this game, starting out well is going to be important, because I would say the 3 most important players for Duke are all freshmen. and even though they're basically sophomores at this point because they played an entire season's worth of games, but still playing at on that stage in in the Final Four, it seems like getting out to an early lead could be helpful in more ways than just the lead itself. And yeah, also it seems like it might be beneficial for a tight game to be called in some ways, and also for MSU to get out in transition a little more than they have in a couple of these games. I think.
Yeah, they haven't really done it against. They didn't really do it against Louisville. They didn't really against Oklahoma, and it felt like both times part of it because they were trailing and playing poor defensively, that kind of all the focus went on playing defense and grabbing defensive rebounds, and they kind of abandoned the transition offense, and it has still paid dividends. I think the half-court offense in the last two games has been really strong.
Well, and I'd also say that I think in these games, especially in the tournament, and this happens in the NBA playoffs too, but the game slows down a little bit and gets a little more intense, and guys aren't as likely to take, kind of forced shots in other games that they might be a little more likely to do that. So I think, teams just get deeper into shot clocks because they're, trying to be as efficient as possible. Whereas earlier in the season, in the regular season, especially in non-conference, guys are a lot more willing to take bad shots, basically, early in shot clocks. So
yeah, and speaking of that, being aggressive on defense, Dawson said after the Virginia game that Izzo basically told him not to go for steals at all. You know how a lot of times he makes at the top of the key, he'll kind of go for a steal. Haven't seen really any of that, and he's been kind of playing it safe, and MSU hasn't forced a ton of turnovers. I mean, they've gotten some turnovers that I think partly were the result of the other team, but they've kind of packed it in on defense and just focused on playing a half-court game. It's been working for them.
Yeah, and I kind of wish that they do the flip side. In that Louisville game, there were just way too many easy giveaways, right? Like there were so many plays where, and some of them were backbreakers or could have been backbreakers as well. And it does feel like this MSU team just tends to turn the ball over kind of a lot against Duke for whatever reason, historically even. Mm-hmm. So keeping the turnovers down is going to be a really, really major element. Because I think that this MSU team can get some good looks, and I think that the shooters are there to knock them down. But yeah, the ability to just hang on to the ball is sort of can at times be the weakest part of the offense, other than getting to the free throw line, and so just not giving Duke easy looks, because they'll get plenty of those on their own in the half court anyways. Is huge, and it's going to be a different game in some ways too, because through this tournament, we've been playing teams that are defensively oriented, right? Virginia, Georgia, Louisville, and Oklahoma are all, defense-heavy teams. So playing a team that's a little more offensively oriented will be a stylistic difference, and that'll be interesting to sort of see how the defense responds to that.
Something on Duke's defense. They haven't been particularly, great at anything, but they prevent you from getting to the free throw line, and they prevent you from taking threes. They're 11th in the country in 3-point ratio on defense. Only 27.3% of shots are threes, and teams only shoot 31% on them. Look at this Duke team. Among their regulars, you've got Okafor, and who's 6'11", but Jefferson's 6'9", and Justice Winslow's 6'6". Tyus Jones is only 6'1". Quinn Cook's only 6'2". So I think, especially a guy like Valentine, it'll be interesting to see how many three-pointers they'll be able to get up. It wasn't something, I don't believe was it the Louisville game they didn't have? It was one of the games, it might have been one of the games in the tournament where they'd barely taken any three-point shots, but it's been a huge part of this offense. They shoot 38.6% from three on the year. Valentine and Trice are both better than 37%, and then Forbes is at 43% on the year, and he's really stepped up in this tournament. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of looks MSU can get from deep, because this is basically an offense that works outside in. They don't throw it into anybody. It's weird, but it's been a good offense without, any sort of post up threat. A couple years ago you could throw it into Nix, work it inside out, throw it into Payne, work it inside out. And last year was kind of a jump shooting team. This is a jump shooting team, but they constantly get good looks because they're so good at passing the ball. And it'll be interesting to see what kind of open looks they'll be able to get from deep, because Duke's a team that doesn't allow a lot of three-point attempts, and that's key for MSU. Even if they're not hitting them, they take them. They kind of spread out the defense and they work outside in. So I'm kind of curious what kind of looks they're going to get.
Yeah, I think it goes along with turnovers, but I think, and this is going to be a really strange thing to sort of emphasize, but screens, offensive screens, will be very important for MSU to set effectively, because there are times when guys kind of get going before the screen is totally set, and Costello actually has gotten significantly better at it and doesn't set as many moving screens as he used to. But guys like Marvin Clark and Schilling need to be really careful, because that's going to be an important part of the offense, is pick and roll, if not turning the ball over in those situations for stupid reasons like moving screens will be important, and also setting a good screen to actually free up some space, since Duke will run you off the line, as you were talking about earlier, in terms of three-pointers attempted per field goal attempt.
Yeah.
So it's something small to sort of watch and see if the screens are getting set well or not.
Yeah, and kind of looking at some outside factors. Duke is coming out of what region were they in? Were they in Houston?
They were in the South.
They were in Houston. They played in the football stadium that went north-south, or the big way if you want to. MSU's coming out of the Carrier Dome, but that was a half field setup. Whether or not do you believe the stadium three-point shoot, or the stadium shooting idea that it makes things, that it's a big problem? Do you believe it's a myth? I've seen the numbers. Overall, they're pretty much the same, if not better. However, for some reason, that stadium in Houston has gotten all the bad games. This game is obviously at Lucas Oil, which is in Indianapolis. What do you think about the shooting in stadium idea?
I don't buy it. I do think that there's some weird stuff about playing in football stadiums like that, but in terms of shooting specifically, the numbers show that it doesn't make a difference. And the weird thing, though, I think, is that when you're playing on a raised platform like that, it seems like sort of a dangerous thing for the players. And I do think the players are aware of the fact that, like, if they go off the side of the court, that there's quite a fall there. You just don't see quite as many guys leaping for various stuff, off of the court as you would normally. Guys flying into press row and stuff like that, because
and part of that is having so much media next to them too. I mean, you're pretty far away from falling off the court, especially on the baselines. But there are more. I don't know if it's falling off as much as there are more obstacles. There are like a bunch of reporters and computers on the sidelines.
Yeah, and I wonder about that. And I've heard people theorize about Kevin Ware's injury, and that it had something to do with the fact that game was played in a football stadium. But I do kind of dislike these basketball games played in football stadiums as a fan, because it turns out I'm almost certainly not going to be traveling to Indianapolis. Partly because I was going to ask you that. Even if you get a good seat for the game, like if you're in the lower level or whatever, you still basically can't watch the game. I mean, those seats are just so far away.
The only seats you can really see are the ones that are multiple thousands of dollars. Right. I was going to ask you, so you say you're not going. It looks like the cheapest ones, I think Vivid Seats looks like to be the official reseller, and they've got tickets up in the very top of the end zone for about $300, while StubHubs are still in about $600.
My take on this is that, like, that's a lot of money and a long drive to go not watch my team probably lose. right? Like it's
Right.
the whole proposition is sort of I don't see the value in it. It'd be. And the other thing is that I went to the Final Four in 2010 in Indianapolis as well, so it's not like I haven't had that experience before, anyways.
Yeah,
Um,
I went to
so
the '09 championship game. I'd gotten his own tickets, and so I was on behind the basket, and I was maybe in the 10th row. But if you weren't in the first row, you pretty much had to watch the game on the big screen because you were just standing there floor level with everybody standing up. You couldn't see anything. I don't barely remember anything about that game. I just remember watching it on the screen. The next year, 2010, I was covering for the State News. I actually was right behind the MSU bench on press row, and that was the greatest seat for a sporting event I'll ever have in my life. So I look back on that. I look back on that fondly. I'm not sure if I'm going yet. My wife has her grandparents live in Indianapolis, so a lot of times we go down for the Big Ten tournament or something and stay there. So I have lodging. It just kind of comes down to if I want to spend money on tickets and how much. Now I will say tickets will be cheaper for there are a couple ways to look at it too. Part of it is you're getting tickets for 2 games.
right.
So, if you want to divide that in half or per game, whatever. The other is you've got some fan bases here that are going to draw, push up the prices. Kentucky going for an undefeated season. I expect that stadium to be absolutely full of Kentucky fans. Indianapolis is right, real close to Kentucky. Wisconsin's not far away, and Duke is Duke. They'll travel decent or well wherever they go, and then you've got MSU, which is nearby. So if you're the Final Four folks, if you're a ticket seller, you got to absolutely love this because you've got a lot of. They're in very high demand. Now the lowest they'll probably get, if you're looking, if you haven't decided yet, they'll probably be the tickets will probably be at their lowest Thursday, Friday, and that's if I decide that's when it's going to be. I'm going to take a look at what the prices are around then. So. But
Yeah, the other way you could think about it too is that ticket prices for the championship game, if MSU was to make it, will decrease significantly.
right, that's the other thing. Tickets for a championship game are always much cheaper. If you go to the Final Four, you can try to buy a championship ticket from somebody there whose team lost. If Wisconsin loses, find a Wisconsin fan, say, "Did you get a championship ticket? I'll buy it off of you." That might be a way to go if MSU happens to make it.
Yeah, but then you could also, if you have lodging there, that you can, that might be an option for you too, right? If you decide against going for the semifinal game and they end up making the final or something like that.
Right, I might go. Right, I might go down, see the festivities, not go to the Final Four game, and if they win, then go to the championship game. That's something else I might do. That's something other fans might do too. So, so that's something to keep in mind. Now the crowd is going to be interesting because MSU is the first game, and you got to imagine this place is going to be 50-60% at least Kentucky fans. They may not all get there by the beginning of the game. But do you think MSU? You have to imagine the Kentucky fans are going to be rooting for MSU in this one. You think?
Yeah, I would think so. I would think. Wisconsin fans probably would also.
Wisconsin fans definitely would.
Yeah, I think just both teams out of self-interest, right? Like you'd much rather play MSU than Duke in that final game. So, so there's that, and also the fact that Duke is extremely hateable, and then also the Cinderella element of MSU to some degree. I would guess it'll be a generally pro MSU crowd, but it probably won't. It just won't be that intense, right? Some of those Kentucky fans probably won't get there until actual game time. That 6:00 start on Saturday is relatively early if you're traveling up that day or you want to hang out at the bar or whatever before your game, which seems probable to me for Kentucky fans. So yeah, I would say there will be some mild pro MSU feeling in the crowd, but I doubt that it'll make a huge difference one way or another.
Yeah. So
I will also say that when I went in 2010, it felt as though there were more MSU fans than Duke fans, and I think a lot of that had to do with just the size of the alumni base for Duke and how few there are probably in the Midwest, and then just proximity generally, but then also just the number of alums sort of in the area.
Yeah, so, and last time you had West Virginia, who didn't bring much of. No, I take that back. I'm trying to think. I think West Virginia might have had more fans than Duke there.
Yeah, I think so. And then Butler.
A whole lot of yellow. And then Butler obviously had the most because they were right there in Indianapolis, and not necessarily a fan base as much as local fans who are rooting for the local team.
Yeah, there were more. I just remember being there, and the amount of trash talk I heard from fans who had clearly just bought like Butler Final Four T-shirts like that day was somewhat intolerable, just because you go like you have no idea. You can't name 3 players from that Butler team, and you're talking trash. Like it's just unnecessary, Like
you still haven't gotten over that. Like
no, not at all. Not even a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we've got kind of all the topics covered here. I'm not sure. We're not sure yet if we'll do a post-game show after Duke. It probably depends if I'm at the game or not. Joe, if you're not going, if I don't, I will let you know, and we can obviously do a post-game show. You're also welcome to do a post-game show if you want to get anybody else on. If anybody's listened to it, appreciate it. I kind of like doing them. I think it's a good kind of heat of the moment reaction stuff. So yet to be known if we'll continue that. But this one will be put up on the RSS feed. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes or whatever to listen, get the automatic downloads. Now, for the game, what is your prediction?
I think Duke wins this one. I do think that it ends up being closer than a double-digit loss for MSU, just because I think this MSU team is playing. You're correct when you said like both teams are playing better, but I think there's a more marked difference in MSU than there is for Duke, and so yeah, I mean, I'll say, and I think it'll be relatively high scoring just because Duke is pretty efficient offensively. I think MSU will look to push the pace a little bit too. So I'll say, let's say Duke 78, Michigan State 74.
Doug Gottlieb just tweeted, watching MSU now, I don't see Sparty having a chance. Total mismatch. Now, I don't disagree there. I think when you look at these rosters, when you look at these teams, Duke is better at pretty much every position. But that's been the case with MSU before, and I think what's so hard to judge is just how well they have played together as a team, offensively and defensively, and that's what's got them here. Playing the sum of the parts being, better than the parts individually. But yeah, my pick is also going to be Duke. I'm going to count out Tournament Tom. I think Mike Krzyzewski just completely has his number. Part of that's because he typically has better players, but you don't win 1,000 games without being a really, really, really good coach, and he's a really, really good coach, and so is Tom Izzo. But I think this team is kind of riding on. They didn't get here on talent, and I think at this point, with the type of talent they're going to be up against, it won't be enough. But there'd be certainly no shame in losing it. Izzo has made 6 Final Fours. He's 2-4 in them. He thought last year was one of those chances to win that second national championship, which means everything to him. He thought 2010 was a really good opportunity because of who else was there. 2009 they run into that awesome North Carolina team. So I don't know. I think Izzo's happy to be here. Not that would affect at all how they play, but I don't think this is one where he expects to win a national championship, and especially when you look at the other side with the 38-0 Kentucky Wildcats going against Wisconsin. What's your pick in that game?
Yeah, I think that Kentucky's just a total monster, and I think that they probably had their scare game against Notre Dame already. I do, Wisconsin I feel like just doesn't have the depth. It helps to have Trayvon Jackson back, but yeah, I don't see Wisconsin having sort of the bench to keep up with Kentucky over a full 40 minutes. I do think, the chances. So the scenario in which MSU has some shot at the title is if Wisconsin pulls off the upset over Kentucky, and then MSU can get away from Duke. And then, I do think that Wisconsin team is beatable by this MSU team, just based on that Big Ten tournament championship. But yeah, I mean, I think Kentucky's just a monster. There's very little that would sort of sway me otherwise. I do think that Wisconsin has sort of the style of play that might give Kentucky some trouble, but I just don't think that they're going to be able to shoot from deep the way that they would need to in order to get past Kentucky.
Right, and between the two, obviously, I think it's not even worth asking that MSU would rather see Wisconsin in the final, especially what happened in the Big Ten. But you're right. Wisconsin has the style to beat Kentucky by pulling their bigs away from the basket, even though they're all pretty much everybody on the team is a big, except for Tyler Ulis. I don't know. I think Wisconsin keeps that game close. I can't pick against Kentucky for obvious reasons, but I think Wisconsin's got a pretty good shot here. Now it's interesting. This has kind of been the tournament of rematches. You had MSU, Virginia as a rematch. You had Wisconsin, Oregon, Wisconsin, Arizona as rematches, and the team that won the first one won the second one. So does Wisconsin continue that trend? Does last year play into anything at all? You got kind of a lot of the same players on both teams, and Wisconsin was right there in the end. It was just probably seconds away from one shot away from beating Kentucky. So I think Wisconsin's got a shot. I think that'll be a close game. But, I mean, my pick's obviously going to be Kentucky. I've kind of felt all year that it was going to be a Duke-Kentucky final. I said a lot that felt like there were maybe 5 or 6 teams that were just kind of head and shoulders above the rest. I think 3 of them are in this Final Four. And it just kind of always felt like this would be one of those Duke-Kentucky years where maybe that breaks the viewership record held by the 79 MSU Indiana State game.
Yeah. It's it sucks in some ways to sort of talk about the fact that MSU has nearly no shot at winning the tournament at this point. I mean, 538 puts it at a 7% chance, including like a 30% chance, a little more than that. It's like a 1 in 3 chance of beating Duke.
Yeah, KenPom's got it. KenPom's got it at 30%, 5-point loss. And to be fair, that's a better chance than they had against Virginia. They only had, I think, a 15% chance or 25% chance, I think, against Virginia. So they do have a better chance against Duke.
Yeah, but I think so. The difference there, and I hadn't thought about it this way until you were actually kind of talking about it just a minute ago. But none of the teams that MSU has beaten so far in the tournament, I would say, had a really significant athleticism advantage, or you could point to a couple guys on any of the teams and go, oh man, those are like absolute surefire NBA guys.
But not top,
including Virginia. I mean, Virginia is a team that's very good and is an elite college basketball team, but
they're a big team, but they're not a very athletic team, I think.
Well, and they don't have. I mean, they're not full of NBA guys either. It's not like Justin Anderson maybe, but other than that, it's kind of a team devoid of NBA talent as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then Oklahoma, I mean, Buddy Hield is, I would also say, is sort of a long shot as an NBA prospect as well. So, and then Louisville, I mean, Rozier maybe, Harrell probably is an NBA guy, but it's not like they had 3-4 NBA options on their team the way that Duke does. So to see how MSU sort of deals with that talent deficiency will be really interesting, because there hasn't really been a talent deficiency so much as just a cohesion and execution deficiency for much of the year. I mean, I don't think that Virginia team it was, particularly athletically talented, more than any other very good college basketball team. So yeah, that'll be an interesting thing to watch, just the individual matchups, and if Duke can call up isolation plays and just kind of get what they want.
It's something MSU's always struggled with. The team's full of NBA quality athletes, and MSU's never had a team. The only time I think MSU had the athletes to match was the year that they beat Duke, and that was 2005, when you had Allen Anderson, Kelvin Torbert, Shannon Scott, Paul Davis, Chris Hill. That was the team that kind of had the athletes to match Duke and Kentucky that year, and that's what they did. This team. I mean, this team doesn't. Izzo usually doesn't, and that's a big part of having a 1-8 record. Is that sometimes when you just have the most talent, the talent wins out, and generally that's how it works in college sports. And Duke certainly has the talent.
Yeah, and it's sort of self-perpetuating in some ways, right? You lose to Duke, you lose a recruiting battle, and then Duke's got the talent to then win again. So it'll be interesting, with Caleb Swanigan making his decision in a month or so, with Duke and MSU near the top of his list. This another game. 2013 was one of those games where it was before Okafor and Tyus had made their decisions, and so that game almost certainly had some impact on their decisions. This could have a similar impact. So it's frustrating too to sort of see that perpetuation cycle where it's Duke is Duke, and we have, so we'll talk a little bit more about this. We've got a Duke hate email thread going between me and Josh and the Jeremys that we'll get up, sort of a roundtable of Duke hate. But recruiting is a big element of it with Josh, especially just because.
Yeah, Josh really hates Duke. He wrote. I remember 2 years ago when I was running the site, he put together some stuff about. He put some stuff together. So I mean, yeah, we've been talking here for about an hour. If you're still listening, appreciate it. We're gonna have plenty of good stuff on the site this week. Make sure you check that out heading up to the game. Not sure yet if we'll do a post-game show. If we do, please join us. Those are a lot of fun. And we both pick MSU to lose to Duke, but of course we didn't pick MSU to reach the Final Four, and here they are. So do they got another miracle left in them to overcome what's been much more than a thorn in the side of Izzo? We will find out. So should be a fun weekend. Thanks for listening, everybody. And for Joe, for managing editor Joe Dewey, my name's Chris Fanini. We will talk to you guys, if not this weekend, then next week. We will see you.
See you.